I first met Micheal Redhead Champagne in Winnipeg in 2014, when I was still learning what the word advocacy meant. If you don't already know, Micheal's an icon for his organizing in Aboriginal youth opportunities, in Winnipeg's Indigenous community, and the downtown and North End city cores. If you've ever wondered how you can frame really complex and challenging issues like Indigenous inequity and the child welfare system with solutions in mind, you can turn to Micheal's work. Micheal demonstrates in many ways what it means to organize with no money, how you can find space for youth to change systems with our voices, and how we can create a community of advocates passionate about tearing the system down, and of course how to create a new one. I'm particularly excited to introduce Micheal, as we're both from the same place, and he came into my life through speaking in my classrooms, through leading the community events I attended, and holding space for Indigenous youth like me to thrive in spaces where we're often not meant to. Micheal's passionate about building systems literacy and encouraging volunteerism. He's passionate about engaging communities to be involved in the design and the delivery and the evaluation of any initiative that affects them. Micheal believes in leading by example, and he now travels across the country sharing his gifts with others. I feel very privileged to introduce Micheal, as I can point to so many ways that he stood up for me. He showed me good organizing and proved to me that we can live our values every day. His work in systems advocacy around the child welfare system is inspiring, and he's brought many youth, young organizers like me, to action through his charisma and his charm. When I think about my time in Winnipeg, what first comes to mind are the folks that lifted me up to do this work. And Micheal did that for me in so many ways. So I'm humbled and I'm grateful and excited to please ask you folks to join me in welcoming Micheal to the stage.
Tanse. My name is Micheal Redhead Champagne. I'm honored to be here on unceded First Nations territory. I'm honored to be introduced by the amazing Dylan. I am absolutely floored by the inspiring messages of Katie. I am humbled at the level of partnership and collaboration that I see represented in the tables around the room. And I'm overjoyed that I hear a child squealing while I begin my remarks. I began my life, like too many Indigenous children in this country, by being removed from my family in Manitoba. And unfortunately, all of my siblings had the same fate. My mother went to Indian residential schools, and unfortunately, even as a mother, struggled with addictions and challenges, poverty, homelessness, etc. And all of us were taken by the government, and many of us bounced around from home to home to home throughout our lives. In Winnipeg and in Manitoba, our system is called Child and Family Services, CFS. So when I say CFS, I feel like they were trying to teach me yesterday the acronym here, and I'm not going to remember it. MCFD. All right, okay, got it. MCFD, gotcha. So it's, of course, unfortunate that this is such a common practice in Manitoba and across Canada. The number of over-representation of Indigenous children in child welfare is no surprise to anybody in this room. In Manitoba, with nearly 11,000 children in care, 90% of them are Indigenous, while Indigenous people only make up 15% of the population in our province. It's unacceptable, and if you're not angry, you're not paying attention. And so as I grew, I was honored to be brought into an emergency foster placement with a family called the Champagnes. And the Champagnes were emergency foster placements for over 300 children like me that needed a safe place to be, who needed a family, who needed love. And luckily for me, the Champagnes were there for countless children that were in those terrible situations, and they opened their home and their arms, and they welcomed those kids into their family. And growing up, those children would return to the Champagnes' home constantly. Strangers to me would show up and say, "Hey, Mom and Dad, I'm here to tell you that I just got my first apartment. I just got my first job. I just graduated." And it was amazing for me to see how many different types of children would show up at the Champagnes' home just to do the report back because of the love that they showed them and the family that they created. And so it was absolutely amazing for me when the Champagnes adopted me. Out of all of those children that they fostered, they had children of their own. They had 4 children of their own, and they only ended up adopting 2. And so I feel like I won the lottery because I was one of those 2 children. And I got to become a part of this generous family that showed me, not through their words, but in their example, that it is all of our responsibility to take care of all of the children all of the time. And I just want to take this moment to acknowledge all of the families like the Champagnes, even here in BC, that are doing that heart work of loving kids when they need it the most. And I'm confident many of you are in the room here today. So let's give it up for all of the families that are opening their homes for kids. So, as I grew up in Winnipeg's North End, I was looking around and I noticed that a lot of kids in my life and in my neighborhood were involved in child and family services. And in my postal code where I live, in the R2W, the number is actually 1 in 6 children were in the care of CFS in Manitoba. This was a statistic from 2014. And unfortunately, it sounds like since then, the number has actually gotten worse. And so it was with that in mind, the understanding that so many children like me were experiencing that separation, that family separation, that I knew that something needed to happen. And so at the age of 10, that was the first time I remember standing up. I remember standing up and realizing that in all of the places that I had moved to, because even though the Champagnes had adopted me, like many other families, they were still a family in poverty. They still had to move around lots. We still had to get haircuts with the kitchen scissors. We still had to dress in secondhand clothing all the time, or in my situation, because I was the youngest, in hand-me-downs. And the Champagnes, as much as they had lots of love, still did not have lots of money. And so the side effect was moving time and time and time again to different places and always having to be the new kid. Now, as tough as that is, it did prepare me for tonight. And it did prepare me for the work that I do today. And so I remember when I was 10 years old, looking around at all the different places I'd been to and seeing all the situations where children who had been hurt would hurt other children. Bullies. Yesterday was Pink Shirt Day. And I think it's really important for us to acknowledge that our children behave the way that they've been treated. And it's not fair for any of us to demonize bullies. It's actually our responsibility to reach out to those children that behave in that way and show them better. And so let's do what we can to quit demonizing children, even if they are bullying, and do what we can to lead with love and welcome them into what we call in my culture, Minopamata-Sewin, the good life. And so, as I grew up and as I was able to learn more and more about my culture and my identity, I was extremely excited and honored to reconnect with my own family. But it has not, and it continues to not be easy. My biological family still very much is reeling from the effects of colonization, Indian residential schools, and now the child welfare system. And so it becomes difficult to find hope sometimes when we look around and we see that repetition of systems continuing to harm. So for me, what ended up happening was after graduating from high school, I was able to work in Winnipeg's North End with amazing young people that had lived experience like myself and actually observe fantastic examples of youth engagement, respect, love, in places where young people had never seen such things before. And it was amazing to see the way Indigenous people and leaders and organizations were able to leverage our culture and our teachings in ways to bring people together and find solutions that many people called impossible, but well, it's not impossible when it's done. And so it's really amazing to see all of the fantastic things that are happening in the grassroots community in Winnipeg that are filtering up to, I hope, future policy changes to make sure that our systems quit repeating this mistake. So I founded a group called AYO, Aboriginal Youth Opportunities, in 2010. And this is a group of young people that, like me, have lived experience in child welfare and poverty, living in the inner city. And these young people are all, like me, beginning to understand their identity, reconnect with their family, and in some cases, create families of choice where we are able to have relatives and brothers and parents and grandparents. And it's been very, very important for me to connect and work with those helpers to teach me things that I didn't know. One of those people is in the room here today, and I want to acknowledge my brother, Nagamo Mayingin, Singing Wolf, who is in the room here today, for all of the love that he has shared with me. And I'm not going to point him out to you, but I want all of us to just take a moment and remember that person in our lives who shared with us the love and the support and the example that we needed when we couldn't find another way. But somebody in our life was able to show us something a little bit different, and maybe that little difference made a big difference in our lives in the way that we acted, and hopefully the ripples continue to help change lives and improve systems. So I want to acknowledge my brother, and I want to acknowledge all of the families of choice that are in the room here today. Can we please just give another acknowledgement? Please. So in working with young people, time and time again, I would often see the adults in their lives that were paid to take care of them have to leave, because this is difficult work, caring for children. It's difficult work caring for children that have been through trauma, separation, poverty, and often the helpers and the staff people in these organizations leave. And often they leave without explanation, leaving the young people behind saying, "What did I do wrong?" And so I remember after working 4 years at an inner city organization, looking around at my 100 favorite young people who I got to visit with every single night, and telling them, when I was ready to leave that job, that I may be leaving this job, but I'm not leaving you. And naturally, none of them believed me. It's true, not one. No one believed me. And I said, okay, you're just gonna have to wait and see. And so 6 months, 5 months after leaving that job, I called many of those young people together at a place called the Circle of Life Thunderbird House. And the funniest thing about that was I called out the venue when I was trying to bring this event together, and I said, "Hey, Thunderbird House, I'm trying to bring Indigenous young people together for an event called Aboriginal Youth Opportunities. I'm just a random guy. I don't have any money, but you should totally let me use your space." And they said, "Well, as a nonprofit, we also have no money, but we're gonna let you in anyway." And so I want to give it up for Thunderbird House in Winnipeg for opening space for young people when they could not afford it. And so again, showing me that sometimes the will to help can override the lack of dollars. And I know that we're here to fundraiser tonight, but that volunteerism and that sharing of space and helping where we can is the spirit in which I stand before you today. Because yes, I want all of you to support this gala and the important work that happens with First Call, definitely. But I ask more of you than just giving money. After founding Aboriginal Youth Opportunities with these amazing young people like myself, we ended up at the Thunderbird House deciding that we couldn't just have one event. And the young people said to me, hey, what happens if Aboriginal Youth Opportunities is a group instead of an event? And I said, that's fine, but for the event today, I did all the organizing. I called the venue, I made the posters, I invited each one of you personally, and if we're gonna be a group, you guys gotta help me. So many of those young people stood up and said, we will be part of AYO, we'll be part of Aboriginal Youth Opportunities, and we will be a group. Originally, we called ourselves an anti-gang, because when we looked around, we saw gangs in our community that were being much more successful at engaging young people than schools, nonprofits, after-school programs. And so we wanted to model ourselves after success. And so we called ourselves an anti-gang, and instead of doing crime and criminal activity, we replaced that with volunteering and sharing your gift in the community. And so that's Aboriginal Youth Opportunities, that's how we were born. But we knew that you can't be an anti-gang forever. Someday you have to decide what you are instead of what you are not. And for us, we decided that we were a movement, a group of people or individuals or collectives that together all worked towards the same goal, even though we weren't necessarily, coordinated. And so we called ourselves AO Movement, and that is the work that we do today, inviting urban Indigenous young people to share their gifts as part of our collective. We work together to build their systems literacy, find relevant networking opportunities for them to sit at awesome tables with influential folks, and also provide as much mentorship and love as we possibly can so that those young people can get into the careers and the lifestyles that they rightfully deserve. And so I really wanted to focus today on one of our initiatives that happens right in Winnipeg's North End, right in the R2W. And that is a group called Fearless R2W. And this group is called Fearless R2W because that's what we want to be. We don't want to be families that are afraid anymore of asking for help, because too many families in my neighborhood have learned that when they reach out and ask for help, child welfare swoops in and apprehends their children and interrupts the family. And so what has happened is there is a culture of fear where people don't want to ask for help, no matter how desperately they need it. And that was problematic for us, and that's why when we got our group together, we called ourselves Fearless. And it's been a really important group because it's not just Indigenous young people. It's community members. It's an intergenerational gathering of people of different ages, and it's actually specifically a collaboration between community helpers that don't have children like myself and what we like to call super grannies. Now I'm sure you know a couple of super grannies in your life. These are the grannies that reach across generations and they raise their grandchildren despite tremendous obstacles and continue to provide love and support. And even though they already raised their kids, they're like, oh, we'll raise these other kids too. And these super grannies are full of love and attitude, and let's give it up for all the super grannies in our lives. So many. So here's what we do. The super grannies, the community helpers, work together. And every week, we volunteer and we sit together in sharing circles or in learning circles. And our point of doing such a thing is to build our system. Okay, I think the feedback is gone. All right, sorry. Basically, what we try to do at Fearless R2W is build folks' system literacy and connect them to the necessary helpers that they need to ask for help, but we don't ever ask anyone to do it alone. We have the buddy system at Fearless R2W so that when a parent comes to us, one of our advocates will become their buddy. And as a buddy, what we do is we show up at the meeting with the social worker and we write things down. And when okay, I'm going to try to not move so much. And when we are able to bring those family members together with those social workers and be in attendance at those meetings, we're able to recap at the end of the meeting. All right, social worker, here are the things that you're going to do. Here are the things that the parent is going to do, and here are the things that myself as the informal advocate are going to do. Here are the dates that we're all going to do them by, and when is our next meeting. And I think that's something very simple that all of us are able to do. We're all able to do that, and you shouldn't have to be paid an exorbitant amount of money to do such a thing. We all have that capacity in our neighborhoods to be that buddy for a family or a child that is having difficulties. And what we can do by being that buddy and by sitting with those families that are experiencing these challenges is we can make them fearless for real. And that is what the work of Fearless R2W is for. And so what we've done is we sit there and we read legislation. We talk about the Declaration of Principles in Manitoba's legislation. We actually recently developed 10 government recommendations on how we'd like to see the system change, alongside 10 community recommendations for us, saying what we're committed to do to getting better. Because nobody likes it when you point at them unless you also point at yourself. And so for us, we say, well, there are some things that we could definitely be doing better as a community for sure, and we're going to work on those. But there are definitely things that this system needs to learn as well. And there is no one better positioned to give those recommendations than Indigenous super grannies and Indigenous community helpers like the young people in Aboriginal Youth Opportunities. So we meet every Wednesday at another community organization that's supposed to charge us money for meeting there, but they don't. Thank you. And we visit. We eat food. We laugh together. We welcome all the generations, whether you're like little baby or super granny, to come and share your story and be a part of our relations. And I think that one of the things that I love the absolute most about Fearless R2W, we usually meet from 6 p.m. until 8 p.m. and around 7 o'clock, most of the parents go out for a smoke. And that leaves the community helpers and myself with all of the children inside. And we call that 6 to 8 minute period birth control. Just kidding, we love the kids, it's really great. But it does remind us of how serious of a choice that is to make, to have a child. And even though there's like many of us taking care of sometimes a small amount of children, you would be amazed. Or maybe you would not be amazed, because I feel like many of us know. Those kids are the real boss here, okay? We may pretend. We like to pretend that we're in charge of things, but it's the kids. Let's be real. So the work we do at Fearless R2W must have been okay. And we began our group in 2014, but we really got going in 2015. And I was very surprised that when the Manitoba government made the announcement that they were considering child welfare reform, that I got a phone call. And they said, hey Michael, we're gonna pick 7 people in Manitoba to lead our child welfare reform plans. Will you be one of them? And I said, yeah. But I was scared. I was terrified to work with the provincial government, and a lot of warnings came from the community saying, Michael, be careful. They're, trying to use you. They're trying to, tokenize you. They're trying to take advantage of your relation. You know what I mean? Like all the suspicions. And it proved to me how poor the relationships were between the families that I worked with and the government that was responsible for separating so many families. I wasn't surprised, but it was a consistent message that I heard that I took to heart as I did the work. And so we worked diligently for a number of months, and we created a report that encompassed and brought together recommendations from previous reports that had been collecting dust on the shelves. In Manitoba, we have something called the Phoenix Sinclair report that really needs to be implemented in its entirety. We also wanted to make sure that we reinforce elements from the Truth and Reconciliation Commission's calls to action, 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. We also wanted to make sure that we bring in international law into our recommendations, such as the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous People and the United Nations Convention on the Rights of the Child. And we repackaged all of those things as the government's own recommendations so that they can say that it was their idea. So, we released our report in September of last year, and last week an announcement was made in Manitoba that they were changing the funding model as we recommended, but dun dun dun. Unfortunately, when you added all those numbers together, the child welfare budget in Manitoba was actually just cut by $100 million. And I feel like they were using that report to do that. And so, it now becomes my responsibility, as well as the 6 other community leaders that were on that committee, to call our government to account and to let them know that our families see what's going on, and we do not accept this, and we need to be better. And it made me really jealous on the cab ride over here, listening to the radio, talking about how here in BC, they're like, oh, hey, money for everybody. And then in Manitoba, they're like, you give me that money. So, regardless of which party is in power, I think it's really important for us as community members and as helpers that give a crap. I think it's imperative for us to do what we can every single week. All right? This is great that we're all here for this gala, this annual gala. That's awesome, and I hope you all come back next year too. But there are 52 weeks between now and then. And I ask each of you, what are you gonna do? How are you going to be a buddy for families that are trying to face down this giant system that continues against all logic to separate children from their families? How are you going to build systems literacy for advocates like these amazing young people right here at the Fostering Change table? How are you going to support their work? Because if there's an answer to be found in this room, it is to be found at this table, with lived experience, with young people who know and understand what they went through and are passionate about making sure not another young life feels that separation, that isolation, the loneliness, and the hopelessness that comes with feeling like all of the systems are working together literally to kill us. We need to be better. And I have faith in these young people right here. I have faith in Dylan. I have faith in the super grannies of Fearless R2W, and I have faith in every single one of you that you're serious being here tonight. But if you are, I need you to show it. Not just today. Next week, and the week after, and the week after, and the week after. And imagine if every single one of us here today identified one additional person that wasn't sitting in this room, and we held that person's hand for a whole year, and we bring them next year. we would literally double the amount of people in this room and increase the likelihood that First Call would be able to get the funds that they need to do the important advocacy that literally supports families and saves lives. So that's my challenge to each of you. Bring one person next year who's not here right now to be a part of First Call. Welcome them. If you are able to connect with someone that likes to sponsor tickets, pay for their ticket. If it's a young person with lived experience in the child welfare system, even better. If it's a super granny, sweet. All right, but we have to continue and sustain these efforts beyond just fancy events like tonight. And I'm so proud of all of the work that happens with all of your organizations and your groups, excuse me. And I'm really excited. I think we can get there. I think we can get better. And Fearless R2W showed me that it's possible. And so when you think it's too hard, when you think the system is too big to change, I want you to think about the super grannies that sit around the table at Fearless R2W and reach across those generations to raise those babies and love those kids. I want you to think about the helpers that surround those super grannies like me, that say to systems that if you want this child, you're gonna have to go through me to get him. Because that's what it's gonna take. And I'm so proud of the super grannies in my life. Not only at Fearless R2W, all the way back to my home, the Champagnes. I'm so grateful. And even though it's tough, and it continues to be tough, to watch families be affected by these various systems, I find hope every single day to love in the face of a system that tells them that their hearts don't work anymore. I believe that it's possible for us to provide supports to our relatives that age out of the system so that they can have safe and affordable places to live, so that they are not constantly on the verge or on the brink of harming themselves, so that they don't have to drown their hurting in harmful substance use. I think that if we continue this work, and I think that if we sustain our efforts, in addition to our jobs, with volunteering every single week to support families, that we can get there. Call me an optimist if you will. I'd rather call myself a realist because I know it's possible for each person in this room to carve out 1 to 2 hours every single week to support families. And if it's not, well, I want you to reevaluate your Netflix schedule, please. And so I think that it's exciting for us to be here tonight, but much like what Katie was saying, wouldn't it be beautiful if events like this didn't need to happen? Wouldn't it be beautiful if kids and families actually had the things that they needed? Wouldn't that be amazing if we worked ourselves out of a job, not just hypothetically, but for real? Yes. That would be amazing. And so when I think about some of the additional recommendations that are included in that little report that got released this September from the Manitoba government, I'm very excited about the work that we need to do, and the work that is before us, and the work that we have in the past. And I stand on the shoulders of the knowledge keepers who came before me to share my own culture with me. And I'm at the very beginning of my journey. I am so grateful to the super grannies in my life that sit with me and share language or stories, or even better, jokes. Allow me to quickly recap. Love the young people in your circle, whether you get paid or not. Volunteer your time to show these families that they got backup. Share your privilege with the people around you, and lift up those super grannies, because they deserve it. And the more we do that, the more fearless we all become. And so join me every week, supporting families. I dare you. Thank you for listening.